Hello everybody, Adrian Pass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
Okay, so what number are we on?
Actually, I don't know. You'll
Well,
have to tell me.
I've got a note here from our frequent
It's
communicator,
number 162.
number 162, and he says, in Genesis 5:18 we read the following, and Jared lived 162 years, and he begat Enoch, whatever that may tell us. So everybody, congratulations to Jared. Apparently he lived another 800 years after begetting Enoch,
Yeah.
and died at the age of 962 after begetting a large number of other sons and daughters. A long and very active life.
Very begetting.
That's what I meant. A lot of begetting going on.
Did you do anything else, Jared, apart from begetting? We'll have to
I'm
look.
afraid,
We'll
as
have to
far as I
find.
know, that is the limit
come
of his
on,
history.
no.
But I expect he was a wonderful man. Ah, dear.
Oh dear, where do we go from there? Anybody listening to this will be so absorbed by the begetting and the
I think that's
and
a
the
good thing.
900.
No, we have been toiling with one or two ideas that are perhaps we don't even want to come onto because they're quite tricky.
Yeah.
We do a lot of weekends with people, and don't we, and groups of people.
Yeah.
And we love the people we meet. We really do. And
Yeah. Well, there was a wonderful moment. There's always wonderful moments. There are those special moments. And we were at Scargill House, weren't we, the last weekend?
Yeah.
And I heard these two amazing things. I mean, somebody was saying that she was fed up because she'd opened her window and all she could hear was owls. And she said those blinking owls. And I remember saying to her, well, you need to just say to them, some of us need to sleep at night. You do know that, don't you? And I was passing this on. And there's a very old friend of ours who's been deaf, I think from birth, if not nearly birth. And she's just got a new super pacey hearing aid, which means she can just about hear a little bit. And she said, oh, bring it on. She said, what time are those owls twitwing? She said, I want to go for a walk then. And I thought that just sums it up. She was talking about how all her life she's watched a robin's little beak moving and know that it's singing, but not actually being able to hear it, and at last able to hear it. And I thought, we always try and couch miracles in such grandiose things.
Yes, it's rather lovely, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely amazing.
Mind you, the people who come on singles weekends, which we don't usually do, they
Well,
come
of course
for
we do.
one purpose, to wit, to woo.
Oh.
I think. Anyway, the thing about
I don't know why I feed you
the thing
any
about these
information
weekends
at all.
is that, I think we are survivors, and we've always managed to come through and get out of things, and we go through difficulties, and the people who are in our groups that we lead seem to be exactly the same as us.
Well, not all of them, but
quite a lot of them
are.
But this is the question: is are they? I mean, okay, maybe we are too, and that's okay. But it's also true of almost every group we lead. But what I'm asking, or what we've been thinking about, is why is that? Because the variety of answers to that are interesting. I mean, do we actually particularly attract people with problems? I mean, surely not. But if we I'm just asking.
Meet the most amazing people.
Yeah, we know that. We're not assaulting anybody. We're saying because we do face problems with people. Is that what it is?
People, you mean?
Or is it that actually most people do have problems? Most people are facing personal or social or
even if they're not,
medical
they're facing problems of the world, aren't they? So it's inevitable that there needs to be space to explore disappointment and failure and various other things that go with that.
Well, that takes us to the next question, which
what's that?
Which is that is it a fact? And we'll tell you why this particularly came to a head recently. Is it a fact that in some parts of the church, some cultures in the church, that it's hard to find the freedom to actually express and truthfully explore what's actually happening inside you.
Well,
and
that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I would have said that along with an outspoken desire for people with mental health problems to talk about them, with people with depression to talk about it, that it ought to be that within the church as well, there's a safe place to be able to talk about these things. Do you not think that's still?
No,
it's
I
in
think
our church.
there is in our church, but there's another factor, and the other factor is the general feeling among many groups of Christians that you ought to be all right, because you're looked after by a God who loves you and cares about you, and therefore, I mean, what will we know? What am I talking about? A lot of people we talk to are saying, where is God in it? Why? Well, we've said all this before, but and my question is, just in connection with that, is this: what does success and failure mean in Christian living? I mean, what
did it ever mean, actually?
Okay, what did it ever mean? I mean,
yeah.
we used to do, our recordings used to be called No Shore in Sight, and we've often quoted Oswald Chambers. But who really wants? I mean, Oswald Chambers says no success, no shore in sight, and I think we know what he means.
Well, he says just the absolute certainty that we see Jesus walking on the water. Yeah. So it's not just a negative. It's just that you concentrate on the thing that's right in front of you. Isn't that right?
That's fine. And if you do see him walking on the water, it's great. If you don't, and I mean, we had an email recently, a couple of weeks ago, as you know, which was I mean, so full of unhappiness over a long, long period. And it's no good trotting out the... I stood in the kitchen after I read that day when it came, and I shouted at God, what do I say to someone who has been trudging through this mire for so long? And I know all the things you normally say. I'm well aware of them. And there'll be people listening who will say, well, what I would have said is this or this or this. But there comes a point, and this is really leading up to, I think, what we've sort of been thinking about, where the desire to be able to help, to be able to own success for others, to be able to bring them something that they wouldn't have otherwise had.
Well, that's,
you have to be very careful about that, don't you?
Well, you do, because we want it for people. Even if we haven't got it ourselves, we want it for people. We want the little miracles. We want something sure for them. And I don't mean the no shore inside, I mean the other sort of sureness. But I remember talking to somebody this weekend when we were at Scargill about that thing that, again, I know we've talked about, which is the Rumi poem, which is the wound is the place where the light gets in. I don't hear a lot of teaching about that. That in the pain, whatever it is, and that might just be not hearing from God, that is a wound. It's a wound. And maybe in the middle there's something extraordinary to happen. And I know whenever we quote that bit from Hebrews, and I can't remember all of it, but it's let us go now outside the city walls. Can you remember to share?
And share in his disgrace. Jesus. Yes, Jesus.
And Paul never lost that. He absolutely determinedly went back to the cross, didn't he? And said, I preach Christ crucified, which for us is very neat, because we can wear it round our neck, a little cross, a neat little silver cross. For the people listening to him, it would have been extraordinary. I preach Christ crucified? I'm not going to move away from that.
I suspect that a lot of people would find it much easier, and I would have done in certain times in my life, to follow the disgraced Jesus. And by that I mean most of his followers leave him. He's appalled by the lack of faith that he finds.
He weeps over Jerusalem because they haven't got it. They haven't got him. They haven't got it.
in the end, he's nailed to a cross, and there's a lot of darkness in the Jesus story, because he had to set his face against making things better just for the sake of making things better, like with Mary and Martha, which we've often talked about, that his friends who needed him and he didn't come. So what does that mean then? If you say, I want to identify, I want to share in the disgrace of Jesus, there's something really powerful in there.
There is. And it's also that determination, and I don't seem to hear as many things spoken about it as I know you and I have found really interesting at that moment where his disciples come in, those very early successors. And it must have been extraordinary. Extraordinary.
Yeah, amazing.
You know,
amazing.
There were people coming and being healed, and demons were being cast out, and you know, it must have, in Capernaum, it must have, you know, been quite amazing. And they come and say, you know, all these incredible things that you're doing. And Jesus said, yeah, well, we're not building a church here. We're going around the villages. And I suppose, again, it's something we talk about a lot. But it never fails to impact me, Adrian. There's something about...
What is the centre of that then?
Well, I think because it's so easy to think we'll build on that. We'll build on it and we'll create something. And then we're seeing all over the place, aren't we, that empires are falling. That, you know, that the great projects, the great desire to create something lasting. You know, we were doing, looking at Daniel and Joseph, weren't we? And the thought of Nebuchadnezzar putting his name on every stone. And I mean, whether it's Christian books, whether it's Christian TV, whether it's whatever it is, if you allow that your name on every stone, your name on what you do is the most important thing, what's going to happen? You're going to build an empire and it will crumble.
Well, most of not just the recent ones, but most of the ones that have happened where people, leaders in particular, have crashed, it seems to be because what they have done is they have owned the work of God that is being done, and
where they're encouraged to do
where
that?
The shame comes is in saying it's not me. The failure. The failure.
No, hold on. What do you mean?
The failure we are invited to is giving up our right to say I did that, and to say I've gone out to where Jesus was, where he sacrificed everything to give us the things we need. And we are not allowed to say to people, I did that.
No, the difficulty of that, Adrian, is that we can say, oh, it wasn't me, it was God. Because that's what people will hear.
Yeah.
But that's not what God hears. God knows. God knows, always knows. We're told that he hears what is done, and he knows what's done in secret. So he knows what you're really thinking, and that's what makes it so hard to give it away every time, and to think, and to genuinely think it wasn't me. Because I think you can think, Adrian, you know, we've talked lots, haven't we, about working with God, working with Jesus, finding out what he's doing and joining in. There is a role for us.
Of course there's a role for us,
So, you know, it's not even as simple as that, to stand back and say, I mean, you may have worked really hard at a sermon and tried, I don't mean you, but I know you, how hard you work, and I think we do too. You know, you want something to be right. So you do work at it.
You do work at it. But the shift, the big theological shift, and we heard an interesting talk by Christy Wimber the other day, talking about the requirement for a new theology, which is about service instead
it's
of
not really
triumph.
new, is it? I know.
No, it's not new.
She's saying it's not new. She's saying
it's not new.
The old theology.
But the root of it for her was that she suddenly realised that although thousands of people got healed one way or another, thousands didn't. And she'd never noticed it or never really focused on it.
I can understand that, you know. I can understand being at a meeting and you see, say, 12 people come up miraculously healed, and she never never says anything negative about her father-in-law, John Wimber. She says God did anoint him and there were remarkable healings. No, you're right. She says, I didn't notice out of 2,000 people that over 1,000 went home disappointed in God, or believing they weren't good enough, or they weren't going to receive a miracle. No, she's got some strong stuff to say about empire building, which is crashing all over the place. You know, these empires are falling.
Yeah,
We were looking, weren't we, at Daniel, and we were looking at Joseph, and we saw Babylon fall. These empires are falling because they're built on something false and egoistic and not Jesus-like.
Well, we all know the temptation to do that, or I do. I don't think you do much, but I think I have done.
Well, I probably haven't had the temptation.
Well, I don't now. I don't think I do. I think now I just feel a bit sick about it, and I also feel oddly excited now because I think the idea that you grasp that you don't own anything that God does is very refreshing. It takes a burden off me.
But we always have to be careful, don't we? Because, you know, when the walls crumble, Nehemiah built a new wall. There's always a danger that somebody is going to come along and say, I'm going to build a new wall.
Always one.
It's
yeah,
always going to be,
one, yeah.
because that's us human old beings, you know. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is exciting, Adrian.
Well, I am a bit excited. No, I'm a bit excited, and but I think that, you know, a vast clean out is needed. I mean, you'd think of the times, and I think Christy Wimber mentions this, when someone says to you, God said this to me, or God has this message for you, and you can't argue with that. I mean, you can't say God didn't. Well, you could do, but
I don't think he did.
We've achieved. We have these games we play. I'm not saying that it's never true, but we have games we play that dignify what we're saying or what we're intending.
But if we
just
did
wrap it
allow,
up in some familiar words.
But yeah, this is a tricky one. We seem to be hitting on so many things, Adrian, because if you do hear from God, and you really, really do, then that ought to be something other people can rejoice in. But because of this sort of hierarchy of experience, there's always that feeling, oh, you heard from him, I didn't.
Oh,
so
of
there's
course
a
there is,
kind of,
yeah.
it's so complex. But
It is
word,
complicated.
I mean, this idea of spiritual abuse is cropping up all over the place.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's as varied as everything else. I mean, it might just be that somebody... Do you remember that experience you had when somebody said they'd been told they were the child of the devil, and it turned out that the minister had said, you're not quite acting like a child of God.
Right,
So that person might decide she's been spiritually abused. There's lots of layers, but nonetheless, we know that little people, ordinary people trying to get it right, can be made to feel as though they absolutely haven't got anything to offer.
And the irony of that is that those who fall and who have said all these things and treated people like that, Jesus hated it.
He did really hate it. There's very few
those
things.
Who say those things, I suspect it's because there is a vacuum where their faith once was, and they're now operating on their own power and reputation and the things that people expect of them.
And they must know so often they're not that person. But people expect... You can never just place all the blame on the individual, can you? Because we build people up. We do put them on plinths, and do you put people on plinths? I think you do. In Trafalgar Square, they put them on plinths.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it, that last weekend we were talking not only about Daniel but about Joseph, and both of us, I think, were overwhelmed as we looked again at that story about the fact that for all the great temptations that Joseph overcame, and he always gave the authority of the dreams to God. He resisted Potiphar's wife
very
and all
good
the
at
other
that
things.
one,
But there was a moment in the timeline of God's story where it was just him standing behind a wall,
making a decision
as his brothers came to him and didn't recognize him, and he was one of the most powerful people in Egypt, that he could have used that power. There is a moment, isn't there? And that's why I say, there are moments when it is up to us, where you can't see in that story that God says to Joseph anything. He doesn't say to Joseph,
as far as I know.
He doesn't say to Joseph, come on, Joseph, you know what I wanted you to do at this moment
I find
in
that
time.
Absolutely fascinating, because people who haven't read the story of Joseph, it is one of the most emotional, extraordinary stories when his brothers come. And you're absolutely right. I mean, he is armed by what he's become through God being with him, which is something.
So he's built a sort of core strength.
But at this point, at a point where the past and the present crash together, and he is in bits, he's in pieces.
Well, I mean, there's not many places in the Bible where it says he goes, somebody goes behind a wall or goes into
weeps,
another room and weeps, and he does it twice.
I think David weeping over Absalom is a little bit similar.
Is it? Yeah, that's another
outpouring of grief.
Yeah, it's grief, but that wasn't a decision to be made. And here, when you think about this decision that he makes, means that, I mean, it doesn't solve all the problems. All of his family plus unbelievable number of relatives come to Egypt, and then there's too many of them, and then God needs Moses. He must think, hang on a minute, that's not quite what I planned. But I find it extraordinary that what you do in the immediate moment with the people in front of you is the job.
Yeah.
It's not the empire. It's not the long-term plan. It's what you do in that moment.
But I must say, I mean, I mentioned this long email that I got a while ago from somebody in terrible distress through a long period. I mean, one of the first things I would want to say to that person, and I have to do it at some point, is I've no idea what to do for you. And I would say I don't actually have the power to change your life.
That's right.
I do believe God has the power to change lives, but I have no idea how we would do it for you. However, I will pray for you, and if anything occurs to me that I think is from God, I will undoubtedly pass it on to you. But I am not the answer to your problem. I would be very happy to listen.
Where all the empires have fallen.
Maybe it is.
We'd love to hear from you. We keep seeming to throw up a load of things, Adrian. But
these are very simple things.
Of course they are.
This is a really important area, though.
It is, especially at the moment. Especially, and we'll hear from you and chat to you next week.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.